Welcome to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, where we aim to take you to the heart of ag policy. I'm Spencer Chase. Our guest this week is Senate Ag Committee Chair Debbie Stabenow, who joins us to discuss the upcoming Farm Bill and plans for her final 2 years in the Senate. But first, here's this week's headlines. Ag Secretary Tom Vilsack says there will not be any compromises with Mexico over its proposed ban on genetically modified corn imports. President Joe Biden met this week with leaders of Mexico and Canada. The subject of GMO corn wasn't specifically called out in any readouts of the event, but Vilsack separately told reporters the U.S. wants Mexico to follow its trade deal commitments. Mexican officials had previously offered a compromise to allow some of the corn into Mexico, but did not allow domestic food companies there to use it for tortillas and other products. Farm groups are keeping a close eye on the dynamics of the House of Representatives following Kevin McCarthy's narrow votes to become the 55th Speaker of the House. The length of the speakership battle is leading to concerns over how long it could take for bills to move through the House. According to reports, McCarthy committed to allowing more amendments to bills, which could ultimately slow floor consideration. That amendment process could prove to be taxing when Congress plans to consider a new farm bill. And finally, American Farm Bureau Federation members voted to call for additional Farm Bill program funding this week. Farm Bureau leaders cited inflation and production costs as reasons for the request, but many of the group's members expressed concern about the optics of asking for more money at a time of growing federal debt. Senate Ag Committee Chair Debbie Stabenow will have an influential role in the crafting of the next Farm Bill and its underlying financial picture. To kick off our conversation, we asked her if Congress would be able to offer the additional funding Farm Bureau and other ag groups will be requesting.
First of all, let me just say that I'm confident we can get a farm bill done, even though it's a difficult political environment. I work very closely with my ranking member, Senator Bozeman. I'm looking forward to working in the House. Always complicated, always tough. I'm sure we'll get it done. There's never been, at least as I have been doing farm bills, additional money put in the baseline. What we always do is we have a certain amount of money that continues every 5 years. And then outside the farm bill, we look for other ways to supplement it to be able to help us meet our needs. And we certainly have done that in a number of ways now, so that we're taking some pressure off the farm bill, the additional money in conservation. Our conservation programs are right now overprescribed 3-to-1. Our farmers want EQIP and CSPP and CRP and all of the other ones. And because we've been able to bring in additional conservation money through the climate efforts, the pressure's off there. We've been able at the end of the year to get some additional disaster money. It's actually the 6th time we've done that. And there is a real challenge here of how do we deal with this more than an ad hoc basis in terms of what farmers are facing. But our summer meals effort that we put in, the help for rice and cotton. So we've added additional money, just like in the last farm bill. I was able to get dollars to address what we knew was going to be a substantial issue around dairy and the dairy margin program as well.
So you mentioned, Senator, the additional infusion of outside money from things like the Inflation Reduction Act, the Omnibus Spending Bill, checking off a lot of those conservation and disaster bases and the school meals, as you mentioned. But is that outside infusion into some Farm Bill programs, is that going to be sufficient to check the need-based boxes that you're going to have in this bill?
Well, we always have tremendous needs, but this will go a long way to help us. Without these dollars, without the conservation dollars, in order to meet the needs that farmers are asking us to meet on conservation, we'd have to cut something else. We don't have to do that now. So this is really, really positive news. So we're always operating within a budget. We do that in agriculture. I want to know what works, what doesn't work, where the priorities are. That's part of our process. But the reality is that we are given a baseline amount every 5 years. And within the context of the Farm Bill, that's what we have to operate with.
We'll be right back with more from Stabenow right after this.
It's not as simple just to wake up one day and go, I want to be a conservation farmer. You're changing how your farming practice is done. You're changing your operation.
Farm Credit supported John and Kelly Watley as they shifted to more sustainable farming, improving the environment where they farm and live. Learn more at farmcredit.com/climate.
At Bayer, we know possibility grows from the seed of a vision. That you can start small and still reach big dreams. That we can nurture the future in our schools to create innovations down the road. That rural communities aren't just farms, but all the people they feed. That's why Bayer partners with farmers to protect those ideas. Because together, we're tending tomorrow's harvest.
Welcome back. Senate Ag Committee Chair Debbie Stabenow says she's open to potential reforms to the nutrition title in the upcoming Farm Bill, but is not interested in cutting the program's benefits.
The reality is that people in our country, mostly families with children and seniors and people with disabilities, get help, most of it temporary for a few years, but it's about $6.10 a day to purchase food. That's $6.10 a day for an individual. We look at food inflation, we look at all the other pressures on families. That certainly is not a luxury. And so we're not going to do that, but certainly always open to doing things better.
Mm-hmm. We have seen some folks on the Republican side of the aisle suggest the upcoming debt ceiling debate might be something they want to use to leverage spending cuts across the federal government, including things like farm and nutrition programs. What role do you expect that debate to play in your Farm Bill deliberations and the amount of money and support you can expect to have?
Well, I hope all of the agriculture groups will come together and support us. I'm sure they will on a bipartisan basis to say this is not the place when we're talking about just paying our bills this is not a place to have a debate about agriculture, food policy, conservation policy, what the needs of our farmers are, rural communities are. So that to me would be very irresponsible. It goes the opposite of what you were just asking me about adding to the baseline for agriculture. I mean, I think when we look at this, it's going to be a complicated process. We need to be responsible for the dollars that we have within Farm Bill jurisdiction, do our very best, and we will, working with our growers, working with everyone who's impacted. This is the Rural Economic Development Bill, as well, of course, other impacts in urban, in suburban areas. But this is an incredibly important bill, must-pass bill. And we don't want to get caught up in anybody else's agenda or ideology here on other debates.
If you're going to be moving a new piece of legislation on time, as you mentioned, perhaps by the end of September 2023, by what point do you need to mark up a bill in your committee and move it across the Senate floor to give it time to get to conference?
Well, we need to do this as quickly as we can, and we will. And so it is not at all surprising if we extend the current Farm Bill a few months. We'd love to get it done. Senator Bozeman and I would love to have this completely wrapped up and on the president's desk by September 30th of this year. We know because of the timeline and all the complexity of everything going on and the challenges in the House that, that may take a little bit longer, but we're committed to getting it done. I'm absolutely committed to making sure we move as quickly as we can in a way that is responsible. And so that's what we'll be doing.
Mm-hmm. We've talked a lot about the Farm Bill here and some of the other pieces of legislation, the IRA, the omnibus, things of that nature. But knowing that this is going to be your last term in the Senate, as you have announced, and knowing that between that IRA and the omnibus, you checked off a lot of what folks see as kind of your biggest priorities in agriculture. I wonder, are there 2 or 3 things that you still will hope to hang your hat on in terms of particular policy goals, either in the Farm Bill or otherwise, when we're talking about the agriculture space, before you head into retirement?
Well, there's always a list. I always have a list of things. And, for me, I want to have the strongest farm safety net and the strongest family safety net. That's how we do it. I grew up in a small town in northern Michigan. I want to make sure we have as much support for small towns and rural communities so that young people, when they go off to college or additional, training, that they want to come home and they want to be part of a strong quality of life life in rural Michigan as well as rural America. So there's a number of things. I mean, jobs and what we do in bioenergy, biofuels, being a part of a number of different solutions. Certainly, when we talk about the climate crisis and carbon pollution, methane pollution, our growers are leaders and will continue to be even bigger leaders in helping us deal with that pollution and the crisis that it's causing. But I want to make sure we've got high-speed internet and that in every community, and that we're supporting people to stay in rural America.
Certainly a long list of agenda items facing the Senate Agriculture Committee, not the least of which the upcoming Farm Bill. Senator Stabenow, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, always.
We'll be right back to hear from this week's panel. But first, our Hannah Pagel takes a look at big changes in nutrition program spending in this week's Ag by the Numbers.
The Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program has always been one of the most expensive line items in the Farm Bill, and recent changes at the Department of Agriculture will grow that dollar figure even more. In 2021, USDA announced changes to the Thrifty Food Plan, which is used to calculate SNAP benefits. As a result, the Congressional Budget Office is forecasting a big boost in SNAP spending. This chart shows the money spent on SNAP since 2000 through the projected totals in 2030. As you can see, the actual spending in blue lines jumps substantially in projected spending once spending from the updated Thrifty Food Plan update is incorporated. Republican Ag Committee leaders on Capitol Hill may use a recent Government Accountability Office report to argue for restricting how USDA determines future updates. They say the report shows USDA did not follow procedures when it changed the model and increased SNAP benefits 21%. If you'd like to go deeper, Jackie Facca has a look at what the politics of the increased spending in the Farm Bill's nutrition title will look like in her story on agripulse.com. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Hannah Pagel.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
Every morning, American corn farmers roll their sleeves up and start the work of growing a better future, one bushel at a time with America's crop. A better future made possible by their unmatched sustainability practices and the extraordinary benefits and uses of corn throughout the global economy. And the National Corn Growers Association proudly supports and advocates for all they do, year in and year out.
Welcome back to Agri-Pulse Newsmakers. We're going to talk a little bit more about the Farm Bill now with a couple of folks that are very well versed in that piece of legislation, having been through a couple battles to produce the previous bills that we've seen on this subject. Joined this week by Rob Larew with the National Farmers Union and Tara Smith with the Torrey Advisory Group. Appreciate both of you taking the time to join us. And Rob, I'm going to go to you first here because earlier this week we saw members of the American Farm Bureau Federation join kind of a growing group of people that are asking for additional resources in the upcoming Farm Bill to support some of those Farm Bill programs. And that's coming at the same time we're seeing folks on Capitol Hill, particularly House Republicans, look for spending cuts throughout the federal budget. So is a better supported Farm Bill something that could be politically realistic given that environment?
Well, we certainly hope so. And I think that what you're seeing right now is not all that unique to the fact that you have a Farm Bill coming up, right? All of the posturing and positioning that folks up on Capitol Hill and the individual groups are doing right now is something that traditionally happens. And as I always try to remind folks, as we look back at each Farm Bill over the last several decades, each one has its own unique challenges and as well as opportunities. And so it is still very early stages. Here in a few, we've had meetings this week with our Farmer Policy Group. We had staff from each of the Senate and Ag Committee offices, both the Democrats and Republicans. And you can tell that everybody is focused on getting one done, but certainly there will be unique challenges to it.
Mm-hmm. Let's say that the farm groups are successful in their effort to secure additional resources. What exactly do you think, if you had the Ag Committee's ear on the House and Senate right now, what do you think would be the best use for that additional resources?
I think there's a lot of attention in making sure that the safety net that we have there in Title I is sufficient and is going to be able to help us out. And that, of course, being paired with crop insurance as the really kind of fundamental safety net for farmers and ranchers out there. I think there'll be a lot of attention on what could be done in Title I to make sure that that happens. I think conservation will be a separate talk. There certainly is debate about whether the money that was recently put into those programs through the IRA last year, how that will affect Farm Bill spending for conservation. But I will say on that, it's still really murky and unclear. We had 4 different answers from the 4 different offices that we spoke to this week.
Well, you mentioned crop insurance in your answer, Rob, and that's where I want to bring Tara into the conversation here, somebody who lobbies quite a bit on crop insurance and is very familiar with that program and the legislative realities that sometimes confront it. We saw over the course of the last week the House speakership battle that involved a number of concessions, not all of them public, to House conservatives, but one of them that we do know is that there appears there's going to be a lot more open amendment process on the House floor this year. Tara, I wonder, when it comes to the consideration of a farm bill, what do you think that means for the crop insurance industry and possible payment limits, spending caps, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think as an industry and as supporters of crop insurance, we're going to need to be prepared to face those amendments, right? Last go round, we sort of got away with one amendment on the House floor. It was a really brutal amendment in terms of really gutting the crop insurance program. But I think we're going to have to be prepared to defend the program, to protect and preserve the program. And I don't think it really matters what the rules committee looks like, what cut-go versus pay-go rules we have. Republican, Democrat, we're always going to have to face those amendments and be prepared to defend the program. And the good news is that we have a lot of breadth and depth of support for crop insurance, and it's bipartisan support, which I think will help us get across the finish line.
We'll be right back to continue our Farm Bill conversation with our panel right after this.
Regenerative poultry production is a process by which nature can actually recapture and restore the energy that is being taken out of a space.
Farm Credit helped Rahi build his dream of regenerative poultry farming and encouraging fellow immigrants to find community in agriculture.
Nothing beats a farm. I'm just pursuing happiness.
Learn more at farmcredit.com/beginning.
Farmers are always there for each other. We shed tears together, we celebrate together, but we also grow together. Farm Bureau is the largest general farm organization in the country. We have the farmers' back. If you're a farmer and you're not a member, we would welcome you into our Farm Bureau family. And if you want to know more about agriculture, come be part of this great family.
Welcome back. If House conservatives have their way, the upcoming Farm Bill could include some cuts to crop insurance. And for that reason, crop insurance lobbyist Tara Smith says it's going to be important for agriculture to have friends on both sides of the aisle.
I mean, I know on crop insurance, we are always going to have folks on the far right and the far left that aren't going to support the program. That's not new. It's not a new dynamic. We've seen that over the years. And so I think making sure that we're really focusing on being bipartisan in maintaining that support for crop insurance is what's going to help us get across the finish line. And making sure that for some of those folks who maybe are inclined to vote for some of these amendments that might hurt crop insurance, but they're from rural areas, making sure that they're hearing from their constituents about why the program is important. So not just from, me, Tara Smith, as the lobbyist, or others in the lobbying community, but actually getting that constituent voice into those offices to make sure they understand the importance of the program.
Mm-hmm. Well, and of those offices that folks are going to be heading into, Rob, as we look at the last couple of election cycles, it seems as if, every time that we see a new election, a new fresh faces come in, that also means the loss of some rural Democrats. You look at Colin Peterson a couple of elections ago, you look at somebody like a Sherry Bustos in the last round, and some folks do come in, but now it's looking like Debbie Stabenow going to be leaving here in the after the upcoming election cycle. I say all this to ask you, does rural America have enough support yet in the Democratic Party?
Yeah, no, absolutely, it does, and I think that it's been one of the key reasons, not just in the party, but that we've been able to have such bipartisan success. We've had really strong leaders in both the House and the Senate who have been absolutely instrumental in getting a farm bill across the finish line, and that includes those rural Democrats like we used to have in folks like the former chairman Colin Peterson, but also former Speaker Nancy Pelosi was absolutely critical in getting some of those previous farm bills across the table. Then you look in the Senate, we still have strong Democrats there from states that are important to getting a farm bill accomplished. So it takes this large coalition. It's often talked about in the farm bill, but as we look at challenges to crop insurance or to nutrition or finding enough bipartisan support to get these bills across, it's that education. Because once again, we've kind of hinted at it, but we have, I think it's over 250 members or more that have not been through a farm bill before. So a huge chunk of this, whether they're from rural districts or urban districts, is making sure that they understand the importance of it and understand how these programs are vital to rural America and, quite frankly, the country.
Well, and Tara, I'll wrap up with this line of thinking, and maybe I'm getting a little bit philosophical here, but I wonder that lack of familiarity that Rob mentioned there with so many members of Congress when it comes to a farm bill, is that a liability to agriculture because they might not be familiar with the legislation, or is it a potential asset because it allows folks like you to go in and do the education process?
I mean, I don't see it as a huge liability in agriculture just because the agriculture community as a whole has such an amazing grassroots network. And so we're able to educate, we're able to cover all of those offices and get in to visit with all of those folks. And so I think that's what's going to be important over the next year, is to really bust out the shoe leather and get up there and spend time with these folks, be patient in explaining things, and really make sure that we're getting that message across. And again, making sure that we're coordinating that message so that it's not just coming from those of us sitting in DC, but it's coming from those constituents, and that we're making the connection, quite frankly, between rural agriculture and what that means in more urban districts. Just because somebody is from an urban district shouldn't mean that they're going to vote against a farm bill, because of that connection we have with nutrition programs, but also just because of the connection around feeding people. And so making sure that we're making that connection for folks where it might not be so obvious, I think is going to be really important.
Mm-hmm. Well, a lot of work to be done to pass another farm bill. A lot of people will be doing a lot of that work, and I'm glad to have two of them with us here today. Tara, Rob, thanks for joining us. We'll be right back with more Agri-Pulse Newsmakers. But first, our Hannah Pagel takes a look at a growing farm labor cost in this week's Map It Out.
Producers using the H-2A guest worker program may be expected to pay as much as 15% higher wages to their employees this year compared to 2022 levels. The adverse effect wage rate is the minimum amount employers must offer and pay H-2A workers as determined by the Department of Labor. The national average, which went into effect on the 1st of January, is now at $16.13. This map shows which states have the highest wage rates in the nation. California comes in at the highest with $18.65, up 7% from 2022 levels. Midwest states have the next highest wages, coming in at or above $17.17. However, some of the states that saw the highest percent increases compared to 2022 levels are Florida, up 15% compared to last year, Alabama and Georgia each saw a 14% increase, and Michigan was up 13%. For Agri-Pulse, I'm Hannah Pagel.
The Senate and House Ag Committees are busy working on the next Farm Bill, which will cover commodities, specialty crops, livestock, and more. This legislation will impact every farmer, rancher, and rural business for the next 5 years. Make sure you don't miss insights and analytics that only Agri-Pulse and its top-notch team of well-connected experts can provide. Register today for a free trial at agripulse.com and click the subscribe button, or email us at pam@agri-pulse.com. You don't want to miss this Farm Bill coverage.
Looking closer, seeing further. That's how we do it. At Curious Plot, we're driven to find what's next for agriculture, animal care, and food. We stay curious because that's what it takes to grow understanding. That's how we plot strategies and tell stories that get results time after time. Marketing, communications, and consulting that look closer and see further. Curious Plot. We can't wait to help you tell your story.
Thanks again for tuning in for another episode of Agri-Pulse Newsmakers. Before we let you go, here's what's on the horizon for the upcoming week. Agri-Pulse will be hosting a free webinar Thursday on farming in an integrated world. You can register for free on our website. And I'll be headed to the Dairy Strong Conference in Madison, Wisconsin. As always, agripulse.com is your best bet for the latest in ag and rural policy. For Agri-Pulse Newsmakers, I'm Spencer Chase. Have a good one. Newsmakers is a production of Agri-Pulse Communications. For more ag policy news, visit agripulse.com. You can also find our new content on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. Don't forget to follow Agri-Pulse and our correspondents on social media to get breaking news and more.